Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in to Guerilla Sports Off Ice. I'm Meghan Angley, and in just a moment, I'll be joined by Corey Masisak of the Denver Post to talk about the Avs' pretty strong start to the season. But before I do, I wanted to remind you guys of our friends over at RefiJet. Did you know that you could refinance your auto loan? With RefiJet, you could save around $150 a month, all with just a soft credit pull and zero hassle. Lower payments, flexible terms, even cash back from your car's equity. RefiJet does the work. You get the savings. Start today at refijet.com, the faster, easier way to refinance.
Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Did I sound like Jesse Montano?
Yes.
He is upstairs, everyone. He is back, and we will have him back on the show shortly. But I'm excited because anytime that one of us is away, we get an opportunity to bring a different voice from the beat on, a beatmate, as Jesse would say. So I'm so excited to have Corey Masisak of the Denver Post on the show. He's been on before. Welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you so much for coming on. I know it's kind of an off day, so it was really nice of you.
It's been it feels like it's been a long month since the season started. They've had like so many road games.
Yeah.
But now it's like, we're not, I don't have to a whole lot of travel in the next few weeks. It's like a nice time to stop and reflect.
Not going to the Canada
No.
games. Yeah, that's probably tricky. This has been kind of hard travel to get on the road for, I feel like, but hopefully some of it coming up will make more sense.
Yeah. This schedule this year is just weird, right? All the back-to-back road games in the afternoons. And I feel like I have already, this year I have like taken my little like roller bag, my suitcase with me to the arena like 3 times. And like that would almost never do that. But like you're in Boston and like you got to take the suitcase because I'm going to go hop on the train. And then it was like, I'm like, I'm going to the airport right after the game. So it's just a weird thing.
Okay, my dad called me while I was on the way here. And it's funny, we weren't a hockey family growing up, but they've obviously come on board since I developed an interest in it. And he was calling to ask me about Jordan Binnington taking the puck from Ovi's 900th goal. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it because my dad, it was a hot topic to warrant a phone call. I would kind of want to know how I should feel about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I had a friend who used to be a hockey writer ask me about it this morning as well. I think he was trying to be funny. And trying to be like, because he did say afterwards, he was like, well, if Marc-Andre Fleury had done this, everybody would be laughing and it'd be a big joke. But he's a jerk. Like, Ball Arena is not the only arena that he gets booed in. Like, and he gets, he's like, I know Avs fans don't like him. Most fans around the league don't like him for a number of different reasons. Like he's, whether it's his political beliefs or it's the way he acts in his crease, he's kind of like he's very territorial and, kind of whiny, maybe would be the way to put it. Like it. So the fact that he might have just been like ticked off and was being a jerk, or he was trying to like maybe soften his image and do something funny, but it just didn't. It went so flat and like people just jumped all over him for it.
Well, even the conversation with the official, I feel like is very revealing. The body language is kind of like, you need to give it back because there's even a lack of trust that he's going to do the right thing from the official. And so I think to his point, if Marc-Andre Fleury had done this, people would expect him to give it back. It's because you're Jordan Binnington. Right. We don't know if you will. And that should hopefully be a look in the mirror moment for Jordan Binnington, that his reputation has caused people to doubt his motives around something.
I do think maybe he thought, like, he did garner some goodwill, at least like north of the border, but with how he played at Four Nations.
Yes.
Like Canadian fans in general were just not happy that he was the goaltender going into Four Nations. And then he played well in the tournament. And so people were like, okay, maybe. But this has probably helped reaffirm that he's just kind of a jerk.
Which is why I'll be so curious how the goaltending shakes out for Team Canada is all I'll say, because I think he did earn some goodwill in the Four Nations tournament, and that will carry some weight. But I feel like his start to this season's been a little bit shaky, and there have been other strong goaltenders that could represent Team Canada to start the year. So I don't know if it's actually in the territory of being a threat,
Yeah.
to Binnington. But
The Blues
from-
are real bad, like
I
shockingly bad so far.
they got the boost from Monty. I think it's
Mhm.
easy to rally around him, but then it's hard to sustain that just on rallying alone. I feel like it kind of reveals the blemishes of the team, and this is more reflective of their, I shouldn't say poor roster construction, but a lack of addressing certain gaps around depth and star talent that they just need a little bit more from to step up.
Yeah, I don't know. They Minnesota and St. Louis are so close to each other to me in terms of like
Don't say
like
that.
Minnesota does have Kaprizov now, and like so he is like that one
Booyah.
like game. Yeah, and maybe no, that's right. So
Favor.
like St. Louis has these like young guys Minnesota has these young guys that they think will push the ceiling higher with Kaprizov now that he signed that crazy deal. I just don't. St. Louis just has. I guess I should say this St. Louis team reminds me of the Minnesota teams. Like whenever I was at NHL.com, like almost a decade ago or about a decade ago. Anyway, they would play Chicago in the playoffs every year and just get housed. And it was like they're a playoff team. They can be a playoff team, but they have a very defined ceiling. And like their best players aren't good enough to win a lot, and their depth isn't good enough to win a lot, but they have enough with the right coaching and good goaltending to be like a playoff team. But if they don't get breaks and they don't have good goaltending, like right now, they're not good.
Yeah, it's been tough. Also, I didn't bring you here to talk about the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues, though that does seem like fun. I do want to talk about the Avs start to this season. 8-1-5 leads the league in points with 21 points to start the year. And I feel like I've seen a lot of different fan reactions along the way, just with some of those comeback games where they just get the point in overtime, but they can't get across the finish line despite launching such impressive comeback efforts. I feel like it's been an interesting start for the Avs. From my point of view, it's been really strong, and it's hard to find much fault. What have you thought about the way they started?
I think like it feels weird to say it almost, but like I think they lead the NHL in points. They lead the NHL in points percentage. So it's not like just like they've played more games than everybody else. Like it's kind of, I think the overtime losses have obscured a little bit. Like this is the best they have played since I've been here. Let's put it that way. I've been here. This is my third season. They look completely different. Not completely different. They just look like 5 to 10% better than they have really at any point. Like there was a point, I guess, after the playoff, or I'm sorry, after the trade deadline, each of the last 2 years, they've made all those trades and they put together a team, and you look up and down the lineup, you're like, oh wow, this is good. And they would play really good going into the playoffs. Obviously they, tore apart Winnipeg, that one playoff series, but like just from game to game, like I asked Jared Bednar about it yesterday, I think it was. And he just said the consistency. Like that's the thing. It was like they haven't. What's the worst game they've played? Like it was probably Boston, and that at Boston, and they had a stretch in that game where they outshot Boston like 14-1. Like it was like they haven't had like 2 bad periods in a game. They've had 1 bad period in like 3 games, and like they've also like they're 8-1-5. They've played one of the hardest schedules in the league. Like if you look at the teams that are in the top 10 in the league in standings, they've played a bunch of games against those teams already.
Yeah.
So like they haven't even really gotten to like the quote unquote soft part of the schedule yet.
Right.
And I just think like, you can look at like regular numbers, you can look at like fancy numbers. They're like near the top of the league in a lot of things.
I was seeing one of the comments from Vaguely, Puck Soup called them OT merchants. And I feel like that is tough because they've racked up a couple points in OT, but I don't know that the majority of their points.
I think if anything, they are, if you look at their actual play, they are the opposite of the Islanders were OT merchants. It was either last year or 2 years ago. They had a bunch of games where they was just like, they were getting outshot 35-23 every night and still getting to overtime and losing. The Avs are not, they're the opposite of that. Like they should have more than 21 points right now. Like they have not, they've had like 1 game for sure and maybe 2 where the goalie bailed them out. But otherwise, they have been the better team in 12 of the 14 games that they've played.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I wanted to key in on some individual performances and some aspects of the team through this point. And I wanted to start with Brock Nelson because he's the guy who signed the second biggest contract extension that we'll talk about today over this offseason and kind of solidified that 2C position, at least so the Avs hope, with that, 3-year, $7.5 million contract extension. So I guess first and foremost, what did you think of that extension and just a couple games into this season, kind of your overall thoughts on Brock Nelson's play so far?
Yeah, I think in a vacuum, they probably would have liked to pay a little bit less, but the difference between, maybe it's ironic to say this involving a contract with the Avalanche, but the difference between $400,000 or $500,000 a year was not enough for them to sweat it. Like they looked at the alternatives and said, if we don't sign this guy, who is going to be our second line center? And, it was maybe going to be Charlie Coyle. There wasn't a player of Brock Nelson's caliber out there that they were going to be able to just sign. And I think, I made, that's a kind of a reference to the Mikko thing and how they might have only been a few $100,000 off there, but it's a completely different situation because they knew that if they traded Mikko, they were going to get Martin Necas. If they didn't sign Brock Nelson, that position would be, who knows? It was a black hole. They didn't know. So, like, whenever they did it, it was like, yeah, they had to do it. I mean, they got it out of the way. It allowed them to kind of set up the rest of the offseason. I really had no issue with it. How has he played? He only has 3 goals and 5 points, which is not enough for a second line center. But it's like 14 games. It's like I looked at all their stats this morning, and it's like everything is like, okay, multiply it by 5. We're about a fifth of the way through the season.
Yeah.
So obviously, 25 points or whatever it's completely unacceptable over the course of the season. But I also just think I looked at all the underlying stuff with him. He's not playing bad. There's nothing wrong. They're outscoring the other team when he's on the ice. The second line is playing well, but not scoring that much. I think they've actually been pretty good. I thought they were okay with Gabe, and they've been pretty good, maybe even a little bit better with Ross Colton. Yeah, I know it's weird. If the team was, if they were 5-5-4, there would probably be alarm bells going off because there's several guys on this team that have not produced enough, but also they're the best team in the league right now. And it hasn't really mattered because I think the Nelson's line is, they're playing, against quality competition. They're outscoring the other team whenever they're on the ice. All that stuff is fine. And I think, if we're 14 games from now and he's still only, if he has 6 goals and 10 points, then it's a big issue. But I honestly think all 3 of those guys are probably just going to score more in the next 10 to 15 games, just kind of naturally. So
I think that a lot of the Avs criticism is being evaluated through the lens of what went wrong specifically in the playoffs. And so players that they needed to perform offensively that didn't, including Val Nichushkin, Marty Necas, Brock Nelson, are under a very critical lens, and the power play. And so we'll get to that in a second because that's been under a lot of scrutiny as well. And I think it's born from a trauma wound of everything that didn't go well in the playoffs. People are very sensitive to. So they're looking at those things very closely, hopefully I don't have to worry about this in the playoffs this year. And because those things haven't been perfect out the gate, I think there's just that natural reaction to worry because with Brock Nelson, those 5 points in 14 games, 3 of those 5 come in just the last 5 games. And so I think that Brocktober may have underwhelmed, but there is still a chance for Brovember. Because to your point, if you evaluated his play, his current projection would not even hit the 30-point mark. And that's an anomaly for a player who's had a 75-point career high season, 3-time 30-goal scorer, who's been a 50-point player 6 seasons. And the only exception in there, the last 6 seasons, I should say, is that COVID outlier season. Yeah. So this is a player who routinely hits the 50-point mark, who's on pace to hit 30. Very odd. Jackie Moon with a super chat. $9.99 Pyramid Pod supplies, and rest in peace to Jesse's Graham. He would love that you use Graham. She is a legend for developing such a gem of a grandson. He is right upstairs. I think he's probably listening, but I will make sure that he hears this super chat very specifically. And I know that Jesse and Hannah have been working very hard on the pod, the pyramid, sorry, not the pod, but probably also that. And it should be coming soon because I'm very excited to do another Dance Mom inspired pyramid evaluating the Avs season. I'm saving my 1-year anniversary member chat for the pyramid pod. Okay, look, It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, not if. Oh, you guys rock. All right. Pyramid pod coming soon, hopefully before the 20-game mark so that we can at least stay true to our 10-game segment. Yeah, I think there's magnets involved. And I think Jesse's using like the 3D laser printer wood carving thing. So use your imagination, but soon enough we'll have the pyramid pod. So going back to Brock Nelson, routine 50-point player right now on pace for 30 points. That's just really odd. I don't think that's going to persist. I think his game started to break through offensively a little bit here lately. And I think that's some of the reason too we're seeing that second line with a couple different options. You know, we've seen Victor Olofsson there. We've seen Ross Colton. I think they've added different and good things to help get that line going a little bit. But you talked a little bit about some of his impact away from the puck too. And I think that penalty kill is where I wanted to go next with this, because Brock Nelson in particular has been, I think, a big asset to what is now a second-ranked PK in the league. He's the fourth most among the forwards in his time on ice on that kill, behind Kelly, Drury, and Nichushkin. So we'll talk about Nichushkin briefly there too, but I think Nichushkin is a player you're alluding to, and his production maybe not quite where you want to see it just yet, but he's been a big addition to the kill as well as Brock Nelson. You know, some of the best defensive metrics among the forwards between Brock Nelson and Nichushkin as some of the most important guys on that kill. And in all strengths, he leads the team in blocks next to Lehkonen, Drury, and Parker Kelly then next, which makes a lot of sense when you look at what you see on the kill. A lot of those guys selling out to block shots, but I think whether on the kill or otherwise, the defensive play for Brock Nelson is a strength of his game, including winning D-zone faceoffs between him and Drury. Those have been two things that I think have sparked some of the play in their own end and some of their strengths on the penalty kill, just because Jack Drury is very good with D-zone faceoffs generally, and Brock Nelson's been very reliable in those D-zone faceoffs on the kill specifically. And I think a combination then of Parker Kelly getting more comfortable in year 2 with the Avs, I think he's a big reason it has stabilized. I think the defensive strengths of Drury are part of that too. And Brock Nelson's a player who's penalty killed throughout his career, but it's been here and there. Like, I don't know that he came to Colorado with the expectation that he was going to be, but it's made so much sense so far. And I think that it's something to consider in weighing then Brock Nelson's contributions through this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I was looking at some penalty kill stuff this morning. It's actually kind of crazy. I mean, it's like when you watch like the eye test for the penalty kill is that it's just been awesome. Like there were, there was that game in Vegas. It was three penalty kills in. They were out shooting Vegas. Like they had, and it was just like, and that one was interesting because like I had asked Wedgewood after the game and he kind of hinted at it, like, or didn't, he basically laid it out that like they had really pre-scouted Vegas's power play and really focused on it. And they were going to do this one thing to take away Pavel Dorofeyev. And he didn't have a single shot at that. Right? He had 5 power play goals going into that game, and he didn't shoot the puck they had like 6 power plays. Nolan Pratt's really good. I don't know if that's really it's kind of a weird thing, like that his name never comes up as like a potential head coaching candidate, but like their penalty kill has been pretty good the past couple of years, and it's really good this year. And like, I think if you just look at the names you just mentioned, like you said, Parker Kelly didn't know. I mean, people in Denver didn't know who he was, 18 months ago. So he's in his second year doing it now. Now he's like kind of like one of the leaders of it. Drury came in last year. Lehkonen and Nichushkin were both hurt at the beginning of last year. Nelson, so like those are the top 5. Those are the top 5 forwards that are on the penalty kill, and none of them were on the roster for Game 4 of last year, right? Like, or whatever. So like, or Kelly was, but he was like 3 games into his whatever. So I just think they're like, it just visually looks good. Like they just don't give up like crazy wide open chances. There, I can think of like 2 that they've allowed in the whole, in 14 games where it's like, oh man, that was a breakdown. That guy's wide open. And actually one of them was, I think it was against San Jose, and the guy missed the net anyway, so it didn't matter. But I think that's like, we're going to talk about the power play, I'm sure, because it's like you said, it's still kind of a work in progress, to put it nicely. But like they're running games at 5-on-5, and they're killing teams on the penalty kill, and that's pretty much the easiest way to put Like, why do they have 21 points in 14 games? Because they're the best 5-on-5 team in the league, and they're the second best 4-on-5 team in the league.
I really like that. Giving the PK some flowers. I think one year to the next, it's not even so different in terms of system, but Parker Kelly talked about how they were inspired a little bit from Carolina's PK to be more aggressive, and I think that translates to some of the heightened shorthanded chances that we've seen born from Kelly, Nichushkin, and Nelson, a big part of that. And I think that's where quietly the addition of Nelson there just adds an extra threat to generate some of those shorthanded chances. And I doubt that's even priority one that they're even thinking about on the kill. It's just sort of this new addition, an added layer to it that has made it even more dangerous from before.
They're also, and I don't know if they've made this an emphasis this year compared to other years, but Lehkonen and Nichushkin, like Lehkonen and Nichushkin start together, and Kelly and Drury usually start together, and then Nelson kind of fits in. Like if there's a big draw, he comes in, or if one of those four guys is in the box, he's one of the. But like Nichushkin and Lehkonen in particular are just causing havoc at the blue line. Like they're and I even against I think maybe it was Vegas too, where they were just like every team has like a playbook now of like how they enter the zone, and like the Avs are just they're picking off passes. They're like waiting for guys to try to throw a little bank pass off the boards, and they pick that one off of and it's just they just don't let people get set. Like they're going entire power plays where the other team doesn't even get set up and get a shot. So it's like that, and I think that stuff that it weirdly like I don't know, like if I didn't play organized hockey my whole life, but I would think like you would just know that if you're on the power play, you have one extra guy, and you like confidence should never be an issue on the power play.
Right.
But it totally, absolutely 100%, even at the NHL level, is like if your team kills off the first 2 or 3 penalties of a game and they don't get anything, they get in their heads, and it's a weird, like it doesn't, it's a whole, and it happens to the Avs too. The Avs have some of the best players in the world. And it's like kind of one of those things where it's really hard for an NHL team to have 3 bad power plays and then suddenly be awesome on the 4th one. It just is. It's just a weird psychological thing that is probably an outlier compared to other aspects of the game.
I think it's interesting too, because the Avs scoring on the power play against Tampa, a pretty highly ranked PK team, after what was an interesting first power play chance. I think that they had opportunities to be dangerous, but I also felt like there was a shot option ahead of one pass too many that they deferred to that pass option. And I just wondered why they didn't take the shot. And it was a high skill play to get that pass off successfully, but it was ultimately stopped either by goaltending or skater. And so I was interested to see then from one power play to the next, it just seemed like they made quicker decisions, operating more off instinct, and it rewarded them with Olofsson getting that goal. So before I dig too deep into that game specifically, I just wanted to know where you're at with the Avs power play generally. Like, were you worried? Are you still worried? How do you feel?
It could definitely be better. No, I think that's the two things that Jared Bednar has talked about the most are shooting it more and creating more havoc in front of the net. They're still not doing that enough. Like I looked up, I think they're like 16th or 17th in the league in shots per 60 minutes on the power play. So, kind of in the middle. That would be fine for them because they're never going to be like Carolina or one of those teams that just throws it at the net and throws it. They're not going to be that. Yeah. They have 2 or 3 of the best shooters in the world. Like they're not, their power play is not designed to just throw the puck at the net and just have somebody clean it up. But you can do both. You can, McKinnon or Makar or Necas could shoot it, and then one of those 2 guys in front can clean it. That would be the ideal. Anyway, they're like 17th in shots per 60 minutes, but they're only like 25th or 26th or maybe even 27th in like high danger chances. And so it's like they're just not getting enough around the net. I honestly like I think of like 2 years ago, it was definitely like the Kale and Val show on the power play. Remember, there was like a 10-game stretch where it was like Val had like 8 power play goals, and they were almost all tips of Kale shots. Yeah. And like, I get that, like, if you have McKinnon and you have Necas, you don't necessarily just want to be a team that just funnel it to the top of the zone and shoot it. Cause that shot, even from Kale, it's a higher percentage shot from Kale than it is any other defenseman in the world, but it's still not that, like, in their minds, they're like, we can still do better than that. And then I think even Kale thinks like unless I can get like a good screen, or I get like I make a guy miss, like it's not, doesn't feel like a high percentage shot to him. But like the alternative is if they pass it around 3 or 4 times and then it jumps over a stick or somebody blocks the shot. Like they'll pass it around 4 times and set up a great shot, and then someone will just dive across and block it in front of the goalie.
Right.
So I do think that generally, I still don't know if they, if the 5 guys that they're using are necessarily the right 5. It's that, they started the year with like 11 options on the power play, and it's still kind of like, I think Olofsson is fine. Like the first few games that he was up there, it didn't really, like, he has a great shot, but like if it doesn't go in, he's not helping you as much as like Lehkonen and Schuster or one of those guys, like in terms of like winning puck battles and passing and all that. So like, I don't know. I think eventually there will probably be at least one more tweak to who those 5 guys are. Obviously, like Nate and Cale aren't changing. I don't know. I mean, moving Martin Necas off of there and putting somebody else in might actually open some different things up, but they like the way that Marty and Nate play off of each other. So it's just, it feels like there's, the parts are there obviously for this. They could have the best power play in the league. They have the most high-end talent of any team in the league, but they just haven't figured out exactly how to put it all together. It just fit very seamlessly with, Nate on one side and Mikko on the other side and Cale up top. It was just like, okay, like, those 3 guys and, you and me in the middle would be a good power play.
No, you're right.
But like, it just hasn't, ever. And then the funny thing is, of course, is like they trade Mikko and they bring in Marty. And last year, from the day of the trade until game 1 of the playoffs, it was the number 1 power play in the league. So we're still like, we're nitpicking like over the course of 60 games, it's still like the 3rd or 4th best power play in the league. It's just that those 7 games against Dallas obviously carry way more weight than the other 50, and then they're off to a slow start this year, like you said, the trauma of last year. So
I think that's informing a lot of the reaction to it. We've got another super chat from Rogue Wave Creative. Of all 32 teams, how many really have a legit 2C? I'm just curious. It just seems like such a hard thing for teams to find. This was actually like one of those little projects in my brain. I wanted to look at who's being paid to be a 2C and kind of their points and kind of the average too. Like, what is the points total you expect out of a 2C? Is it kind of around the 60 point mark? Is that actually a little bit too low? And I wanted to go from there.
Yeah.
Do you know?
And then obviously, like, I think any discussion about a 2C in this city revolves around the ghost of Nazem Kadri, who was more of like a 1. So I think there are a handful of teams that have like 1A and 1B. Like Leon Draisaitl is a 1B, or he's Leon Draisaitl is a 1A. I'm trying to think of some other, like Dallas has more. I mean, Dallas doesn't have like the superstar number 1, but their 1, 2, 3 at center is quite good. Obviously, like the gold standard back in the day was like Sid and Gino in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But so I think how many teams legitimately have like a great second center? Probably like, my guess would be, if I looked at the standings, I could probably think of it. I would guess it's probably about 8 or 9, honestly. And like, and then even like, Florida's won the cup the last 2 years. Sam Bennett is not, like, you put Sam Bennett on a bad team and he's not a good second line center, but on that team, the way that they play, what they want him to do, he's a killer. And especially he's very good in the playoffs. I
think because 1 through 3 is so strong with Lundell as an option that it's like when you have such a good 3C, I think that's where allowances are granted to your 2C.
I do think that like Casey Middlestat could be a good second line center on a good team. He needs guys on each side to kind of, he's not a guy who's going to drive it, but he's a guy who can support the guys who drive it. And the Avs had the guys to put with him to make that work. It just, he just went into this like crazy 3-month funk and then it was over. I think if you compare the two of them, like Brock Nelson as he ages probably doesn't have the same offensive ceiling as Casey Middlestat did, but he's a much better all around player. He does actually help push the puck in the right direction. He does win puck battles. He does all the defensive stuff, some of the stuff that Casey didn't do. So like, I think in the aggregate, like his offensive ceiling might be a little bit lower than Casey's over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
But he's just a better all around player. So, and I think the way that the team is set up with the wings that they have, you know, I don't want to say they don't need Nazem Kadri. They don't need a guy who's a 30 and 90 guy or whatever as the second line center. They just need a good player who doesn't hurt them.
Yeah. I'd like to see the 60-point mark be the floor for the points. And that's honestly in part to make up some of Mikko Rantanen's production, because between what Martin Necas will bring, and he's off to an insane start, I think the combination of like a 60-point 2C and whatever Martin Necas provides could be enough. And that, you know, it's putting some heavy responsibility on Marty's shoulders, but he did just sign a huge extension. So I think it's rightfully placed. Going back to that Avs PP though, I think you mentioned Victor Olofsson and his fit here early on. I also felt the same way when they were kind of forcing it with him on the power play. I saw the intent behind the why, and he obviously has a body of work to support why it made sense, but it wasn't making sense to me early on. But honestly, looking at that Tampa game, like one power play to the next, Victor Olofsson was among the only players just willing to shoot it that I was like, that's actually a really welcome relief. And I appreciated it because I think it rewarded them in the next power play, that, you know, having something a little different than from the elite passers that are represented on the power play, having a player that's also just willing to shoot in Victor Olofsson, I think will make a lot more sense as the year goes on. So even beyond the power play, I wanted to know how you felt about his fit early on.
I think he's certainly been, you know, worth the money that they, you know, I mean, like he's you know,
this is not Tomas Tatar.
He's right. So that was the thing, right? I remember talking about that with somebody before the season. It was like, is he going to be Tomas Tatar or is he going to be Jonathan Drouin? And I think both of those were probably unfair. Like, well, he could have been bad and he could have been Tomas Tatar. But you know, saying that he could be Jonathan Drouin is probably not fair. Jonathan Drouin is like just on a pure talent level is one of the best hockey players in the world. He's just had injuries, whatever. Olofsson has actually had some pretty productive years with Buffalo and played pretty well with Vegas. I think he's, for what they wanted him to be, which was just like a middle six guy who shoots the puck a lot and like doesn't hurt them defensively. I think that's exactly what he's been. I think he's been totally fine, like without the puck. He's like a solid player. He's not like a soft perimeter guy. He's just a little, he's like, everything is like solid, and he can rip it. And like and I do think, like you said about the power play, like if you look at the five guys that are out there and you're scouting from the other team, you're not worried about him. Like he's the one. It's like the other teams are like, we're gonna, you know, we'll give you that shot because we know the other guys are going to beat us if we so that's so one of two things is either going to happen. Either he's going to continue to get that shot over on the far flank and he's going to put them in and he's going to have a great year, or eventually some teams are going to be like, all right, we can't just give this guy who can really shoot it, you know, we have to, you know, like if in the NBA actually has a stat called gravity where you can like see how much defenses like move towards like Steph Curry or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander when they have the ball. We don't have that in hockey. It would be amazing because especially on the power play, like Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon's gravity when they have the puck is insane compared to, and so like I do think over the course of the next month or two, if Olofsson keeps playing well, you would probably see a shift where it's like, okay, we're not going to just leave that guy open all the time. We're going to have, and that could in theory open up, you know, Nichushkin or Lehkonen or somebody in the middle, or just more stuff on the other side of the ice. So
I do think you mentioned it earlier that there are just so many threats between both units that I think they have lots of options at their disposal. And I appreciate the gradual method they're using to not too quickly move on from some of these options before really giving it a fair chance to see how it comes together. And I think that's going to stabilize as the year goes on. I think this will just become a better power play than what we've seen so far.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to a conversation around the back end a little bit. Brent Burns wanted to talk about what you're seeing some of the early returns. I remember after the Carolina game that I was seeing lots of clips on the timeline of a reverse hit from Brent Burns and fans weighing in like, why didn't he do this in Carolina? And I don't really think that Brent Burns is doing that on a nightly basis, but I was curious, since you've seen lots of different versions of Brent Burns, if the Avs are getting a very standard Brent Burns experience, or if there is maybe a little juice to his game.
Yeah, that's a good question. He I mean, I spent like half a season with him in San Jose, and that was we were just in San Jose, and I was actually talking to the other Sharks writers about, like, off the ice, we're getting a much different version of Brent Burns. Like, he is much like softer and like more willing to talk to the media. He was
Really?
just, yeah, and it wasn't,
Nice.
he was a character his whole time in San Jose, but like near the end, and I was there right at the end, he was like one of the last guys standing from an era that, like, they never won the cup, and then they were in this whole, like, are they going to rebuild or not rebuild? And it was just a very, like, kind of toxic might be the wrong word, but it was just, everybody was just kind of surly and kind of downtrodden. They were losing a lot, and so he pretty much only talked after games, and and they lost a lot of games, so it was like really it was just kind of a weird time with him. He spent a couple years in Carolina. He has like totally kind of mellowed out, and like he's, you know, what he's been with us, he's like he's certainly a character, and you know, and he has like kind of embraced being like the old man in the room. And as far as on the ice, like, I don't know, I think he's had some like games where he's been kind of up and down, but his like, I would say his baseline is better than Ryan Lindgren's, and I don't think his like ceiling is anywhere near what it used to be, but just him being solid and not being like a drain.
Yeah.
I think that might have been the issue for some Hurricanes fans, like the ones that really pay attention to the numbers. Like his underlying numbers weren't great compared to where they were playing him. Like, they were playing him still a ton, like way more than he's playing now. And so, you know, like, he's not a number 2 defenseman anymore. He's a, you know, 4-ish. And if you play him in that role and don't expect him to be Mr. All-World everything, I think he's fine. And I think he's definitely been an upgrade over Lindgren, which is kind of like and then maybe, you know, he's better than Sean Walker was 2 years ago, or whoever you want to put like in that. Like, I think the biggest reason why the defense core looks better right now, even without Sam Girard, is that Sam Malinsky has been good, and Brent Burns has been solid to good. And like, those are 2 spots when you have, you know, 2 of the best in the world. You know, if you're, and Josh Manson is, he's a really hard one to pin down, because like there are nights where it's just like, what are you doing, Josh? But then there are other nights where it's like, holy cow, like this guy who is like supposed to be a big defensive defenseman, he has like real puck skills, real juice going forward. Like, he'll, you know, like there was the one game where there was like, I think that's the 3rd time this game that Josh Manson has led an offensive rush. It's just like, what, you know, like, so he's like and I do think that like him playing with Burns, it's funny. I think it might be even when I was sitting here with Jesse, we talked about, like, I thought that Girard and Burns were going to work great together, because Girard likes to go and Burns likes to sit back. I think Josh Manson has kind of slid into that spot and been like, oh, like Brent's got, he'll be back there. Like, and so he kind of does more freelancing with the puck. And again, some nights it's like, oh no, what are you doing? And then other nights it's like very much like a positive ad for what's happening.
I was trying to find the game where he was leading the rush like a couple times. I've called it Dance and Manson, because there have been shades of the 2022 playoff Manson that we're seeing in regular season. And I think I don't want to say it's unusual, but, you know, he's run into availability issues in the regular season. And so I just feel like we haven't seen this kind of a start from him ever, because, you know, he joined the team in the cup year after the deadline. So I think that it's been fun to see this version of him that feels like the dialed up playoff version. It's come, you know, it's a high wire act. Like, it's come sometimes with games that feel a little bit off. But I feel like might be stretching here, but I feel like the addition of Brent Burns in what he adds in levity around the room and that shooting instinct has had an overarching impact on the D-core, because I think that the fun that Manson is having, I would just guess, is linked to some of what Brent Burns adds. And then that overall shooting instinct, because between Manson, Malinsky, and Burns, they're just shooting so much. And I don't think it's so different from, you know, the shooting impact we've seen from Cale Makar in years past, but even just looking at Malinsky's early numbers, because I think he started the year strong last year. I don't know that the production was quite there in the same way, but he had like 4 points in 9 games in late October, early November to start last year. And then his game kind of stagnated. And that's when he sat out for a little bit. And he came back, and I think he finished out the year strong. But the way that he started this year, 6 points in 14 games, you know, will be projected to be a higher pace than ever before. And I think that consistency and just seeing him, I think he's like third on the team in D for shots, with still good defensive metrics. You mentioned like he's played good, so that's kind of helped to balance where Brent Burns is at. And I just wanted to highlight that a little bit because I do think the Brent Burns impact probably touches this in some way in what we're seeing from some of the other defensemen, to include Sam Malinsky.
Yeah, I think that's fair for sure. I mean, I look at all of them and this it kind of, I don't know, it like, so Brent Burns has, what do you have, one goal and 6 points. I think Sam has 1 goal and
It's
6
very
points.
comparable, yes.
Like Devon Taves doesn't have a goal. Like Kale's like the only one of them that's like really like scoring,
right?
But they're all playing well. Like there's really not like a, oh man, like I just think back to like the last couple of years. There's always been like either one guy or one pairing where it's like, well, compared to the rest of the team, this doesn't look exactly right. And like, I mean, the fact that like, I think Sam Girard was below 50% in expected goals percentage before he got hurt. But like the guys who are playing now, they're all like those 5 for sure. We'll leave out whoever the 6th guy is, which will obviously be Girard eventually. Those 5 guys are all like 55, 58, 60, 60. It's like, I think Taves and Makar are actually the 2 lowest, which is funny because obviously they're they win whenever those guys are on the ice. So yeah, no, I think that like you said, like there's probably is some like intangible stuff with Brent that's just sort of, and I honestly, I mean, I don't know if we were going to talk about him or not. I can't remember if you did, but I think some of the stuff is happening with Gabe too. Like, a lot of people have been asking like, what's wrong with him? Is he playing? He's playing like the other night. He was really good. That was probably the best game he's played all year, but,
the fight night.
Yeah.
I agree.
But even without the fight, like he was just
without the fight.
He was like the one guy who had his legs in the first 10 minutes of the game, and then he just kept playing. They were just, I don't know if he's ever going to be a 25 goals and 60 point guy ever again, but like on this team, it's the same kind of the same thing with Brent Burns. Like they were really good without Gabe, and they were really good without Brent Burns. Like they were, we went into the playoffs last year thinking they could win the whole thing. Well, now those 2 guys are on the team, and like Gabe doesn't need to be the 3rd best player on the team or the 4th best player on the team anymore. And Brent Burns doesn't need to be a first pairing defenseman on this team. They just kind of need to like find a spot and just be themselves. And I honestly think that like, we talked about how like they haven't had a bad period, or they've had one bad period every 3rd game or something like that. Like that's Gabe. Like, what I mean? Like it is like, it's his, I mean, I'm not saying anything. I'm not trying to like negate the fact that whether how good of a leader Nate or Devon or Kale is, but they all talked about it for 2 years since I've been here about how much they miss Gabe. And I would watch them play and I'd be like, you guys don't miss Gabe. You're a great team. You guys are scoring, Nate had 140 points the 1 year. Like, you guys don't miss Gabe. But then now that they're here and they're playing as a team so well consistently, it's like, okay, maybe that's what they were talking about whenever they miss Gabe. Like Gabe just, they probably lose that game the other night against Tampa if he's not there. And like it's a very simple like A to B conclusion to draw. But like name another random game that they won in the middle of the year where they only played well for part of it. Like maybe they lose that game too. And that's just, like I said, as long as the underlying numbers are good whenever those 2 guys are on the ice, the production is like kind of secondary. I think they're doing everything that they want them to do.
Yeah, I love this comment from Bama Metcalf. We need Gabe's leadership more than anything, because you're right. When you're evaluating his play through this point, through the lens of scoring impact and comparing it to what he's done in the past, it's definitely not where it was. But looking at the Tampa game, where all of the players, like Ross Colton included, were talking about how they just didn't quite have the jump at the start of that game. You mentioned Landeskog among the few who had his legs under him. The fight, then, it feels like it becomes that much more important, because Victor Olofsson, in his post game after such a great game, he makes mention of the difference that fight made to kind of add a little bit of energy back to the bench. And I think that Gabe's ability to kind of diagnose that very early, and I don't think he went looking for that fight, just to be clear and fair, but he certainly had no issue answering for it either. I think he recognized that his team needed that, and it was a no-brainer. And so those little things over the course of a season, I think, will make a huge difference in the team's drive to stay in games and come back in games. I think that he is the driver of that. And it's different because And looking at how the Tampa game starts with a mistake, kind of, from Cale Makar. I'll say mistake or like on the wrong end of bad luck. I immediately am thinking of his stick breaking in Game 7 and how it's really important for players who might be on the wrong side of bad luck to have maybe some of these learning lessons in the regular season to be able to find a path back to winning and letting that roll off their shoulders more easily. And I think that was hard for the Avs in the Game 7 breakdown. And again, there were things that happened beyond their control, like a stick breaking, that are really hard to overcome. And it was a much shorter window, too, that they were given to be able to overcome it in Game 7 compared to the rest of this Tampa game. But I think that having someone like Gabe there to settle it down will pay off so much in their composure and how they respond to things maybe not breaking their way in games.
Yeah, I believe that. I'm trying to remember. I had talked to a bunch of people about Gabe before the season started. And I think this quote from Brian Boyle, who works for NHL.com, and I had covered him in Jersey, and he's one of those guys. Like every team has like kind of like the go-to guys in the for the media. Like,
yeah.
And he was every team he's ever been on, he's been one of those guys, right? And
we love those guys.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk to a couple of people around the league, and whenever the NHL.com person was like, "Hey, do you want to talk to Brian Boyle?" I was like, "Yes, he would be perfect for this." I'm not comparing Gabe's trials with his knee to Brian, beating cancer, but like Brian had the game taken away from him. He went through that whole thing, kind of similar process, and so I did kind of want to hear what Brian had to say about Gabe comeback. And I can't remember if I actually got this in the story, but he did say look, Gabe was one of the most respected, best, whatever you want to call it, captains in the NHL before the knee thing. And he was just like, if I'm in that locker room and I'm having a bad day and I look over at that guy, like, how am I having a bad day anymore? It's just like, there are just going to be times. And I think that kind of goes back to like the standard and the consistency and the focus has just been at a different level this year than it was. I mean, Jared has mentioned it a few times, and it's probably like 25% the fact that that Dallas game 7, the series, all of it still pisses them off. It's like 25% Gabe, and it's 25% the fact that they're all their best players are healthy. That matters. And then there's just some other stuff thrown in there too, but like I just think that guys like Gabe and Burns, they just have like, this is where I've been like a numbers guy my whole life. So here I'm like, spouting about like intangibles and leadership and stuff, but it's true. I love it. But like with Gabe, it's even people who are like, all the like hockey is way too much into like the intangible stuff and the rah leadership. Like Gabe is on a different level than any other person on any other team that I've ever covered. So
there's a real difference culturally, and it's hard to define, in part because we're not in the room for some of that, and on the bench for most of it. Right. I'm on the bench some of the time, apparently. No, we're not on the ice, we're not on the bench, and we're not really in the room, right? There's a version of them that we see that's filtered for the media. So all that to say, I think continue to go off. And honestly, we can continue to go off around the difference of the goaltending, because we talked about it last year, but it's not just that these goaltenders came in between Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgewood and helped to stabilize things in net because they were good goaltenders. It was also what they added in their attitude and the levity that they bring that I think also kind of changes then the overall picture of the culture inside the locker room. So that, in addition to their play on ice, where are you at with the goaltending? I know that some people were concerned that Mackenzie Blackwood didn't get the start against Tampa, but I think that Jared Bednar and Scott Wedgewood have addressed this since, that I don't think that there's a goalie controversy on our hand.
No, I don't. I mean, I think when Mackenzie Blackwood is ready and is playing, he's going to play 2 out of every 3 games. And that's just what I mean. Look, I would say it's not like the level of concern from 0 to 100 should not be 0 about Mackenzie Blackwood.
Right.
He has had at least one full season and maybe part of another where like injuries just derailed it. Like he just couldn't. And like he's has mentioned to me about like different things that happened whenever he was in New Jersey, that it was just, he felt like the world, he just couldn't get healthy enough to prove how good he was.
Right.
Now he has kind of like, he has a body of work now, whether it's San Jose or here in Colorado, where it's like people know that he's good, whatever. But like, I would just say, like, I think they're being cautious with him because Scott Wedgewood has played so well. I think if Scott Wedgewood wasn't playing well, McKenzie would have played against Tampa.
Right.
He might have also made his debut before he might have played the weekend before or something like that as well. So Wedgewood's play has given them like a luxury to kind of slow play this thing with Blackwood. I think like overall, like the different, I don't know, it's hard to not disparage the two guys that were here at the beginning of last year whenever you talk about Scott and McKenzie. I'm not trying to, but like, look, there are guys in that locker room that just didn't like Alexander Georgiev. It's not I'm not like stepping it. Yeah, it's not a state secret. Like, there were guys in the Rangers locker room that didn't like him too. And one very famous thing where he ends up, punching one of his teammates, but that wasn't, and everyone at the time, that wasn't really his fault.
He alienated teammates in San Jose, not like by upsetting them, just by self-isolating.
Yeah, he's just a quiet guy who doesn't, he's like such a, and I don't know what Justus Anunen's personality is like when he's comfortable, but he was a young guy speaking. Yeah, he seems like kind of an introvert too. So just flipping those two guys out and bringing in these two guys who are like, Scott Wedgewood is like the definition of like a guy who is a leader on a team, like, which is, there aren't that many goalies who are like that, but he's definitely one of them. And then you pair that with Blackwood, who is like everybody's buddy, and it's just a cultural shock. Like, it's just an upgrade or a shock, or whatever you want to call it. But it's like, it's so different with those two guys in there because they are just so much more connected to the rest of the room than the guys were before.
Yeah.
And so there's like, everybody plays with a little bit less worry about like, oh, if I make a mistake here, the puck's going in the net, which was a huge thing at the beginning of last year. Everybody is like, they see Scott Wedgewood like flopping all over the place and, shoving a guy in the face or whatever. And they're like, yeah, we're going to play for him. Like, there's just little things like that just kind of add up. And also it certainly helps that like, none of this would matter if those guys both had like 890 save percentages, right? Like, the fact that they're playing well is kind of the base of all of this. That's, they play well, the teammates like them, it all works.
Yeah, you mentioned the team stepping up too, and how they play in front of guys like Scott Wedgewood. And that first 10-game segment, I don't have the metrics, but Bednar and players have reported to me that a lot of the defensive details in their own end actually came back as tops in the league in terms of limiting some of those cross-slot passes and just overall time in their own end. So I've seen some people kind of push back too and feeling differently about that, but I do think this has been a strong start for the Avs in terms of team defense. What do you think?
Yeah, no, for sure. I was just looking, I know they're like, their expected goals for, which is like offense and defense, obviously, is first in the league at 5-on-5, and like Washington is like close, and then third is Tampa, and is not close. Like the difference between them and Tampa is like the difference between Tampa and like 20th place. Like, they are well out in front of everybody but Washington. And it like, on one hand, it's like, well, yeah, they have all this like offensive firepower,
right? But
it really is, the difference is the offense is about the same as it's been the past couple of years. The defense is just better. Like, that's just, it's like, the difference between them being like a 55% expected goals team and 59, which is where they're at now, is defense. And the offense is very good.
Yeah.
It's deep. All four lines are capable of, driving offense, or like at least getting the puck in the other zone, whatever. But like, they're playing better defensively. That's just it.
I can't believe I glossed over Martin Necas. So we'll finish off the show with your thoughts on that extension and his play to start the year. So I guess first thing is, what were your initial thoughts for the Martin Necas extension, especially kind of looking ahead, since it is an 8-year deal at $11.5 million?
I honestly thought that that's almost exactly what I figured the number would end up being, right around there. I think a week or two before that, I probably would have said, maybe even did say, make 11.5 the barometer. If it's less than that, the Avs won, and if it's more than that, the agent won.
Yeah,
it'll be 11.5. So that's a draw. But honestly, like, it kind of goes back to the Nelson and Rantanen thing. Obviously, everything with Marty kind of goes back to Mikko, but like, to me, it's the same thing. Like they were willing to trade Mikko Rantanen because Martin Necas was in the trade. They weren't going to trade Mikko Rantanen on January 24th, 2025, right? That was still this year. Jeez, feels like it was 3 years ago. They were not going to trade him to, name another team for 4 draft picks,
right?
Or for like it was, right. As much as we have always focused on the number that he was going to sign for, not going to sign for, it's all about the. I mean, at least part of the deal for the Avs was that they were able to get Necas in the deal and Drury and the picks. Flash forward a year, and there's no Marty Necas out there. Like that's, I mean, like it's kind of in the same vein as the Nelson thing. That has sort of been my thought all along, was you pulled off a thing that most teams aren't able to pull off, which is where you traded a homegrown superstar for a young, close-ish version of that. Like Lightning wasn't going to strike twice. Like the next deal would have been, I was like you try to find anybody, and it's like, maybe it could have been if the Predators fall out, maybe it's Philip Forsberg and another player and picks. It's like almost like the same type of deal. But like if you keep doing something like that, where you get like a guy who's not quite as good as Necas and another depth player and 2 more picks, like eventually the end result of all that is you went from Mikko Rantanen to a guy who's nowhere near as good as Mikko Rantanen.
Very watered down.
It's like 90% of, then the 90% is, that's not, So I think, they were kind of in a similar situation as they were with Nelson, where they looked and they said, we don't really care about 2030 right now. And for 2025 and 2026 and 2027, he's the best chance that we got. And, and it's working out. We'll see. Sorry, I think like it's still going to be, whether or not that deal worked out in the long run, it's all going to come down to, does Marty have like a couple of good playoff runs in him? If they win another cup, the stuff with Mikko will be like, whenever they do the 20-year reunion for the 2022 team, the stuff about how Mikko's career won't matter. But like if Marty has bad playoff runs and they never win the cup again, then that's just going to be a thing that lingers.
9 goals, 9 assists through 14 games to start the season. I think the scrutiny for Marty Necas has been around what to expect from him in the playoffs. And my personal belief is that the sample size of Colorado Avalanche playoff hockey specifically is too small for me to be very worried about it. I actually am encouraged by what I saw. I know the production wasn't there, but I think that over the span of this regular season, I think Marty Necas can become the type of player that is more impactful in the playoffs for the Avs than we've seen yet.
Yeah. And I think as long as he's like, he does, I mean, I think the general, like, very surface level idea of him is, well, he's a perimeter guy and he's a very skilled guy and he's never going to like be the guy who, goes and gets his nose dirty. Well, first off, like he doesn't have to turn into Arturi Lehkonen. He can be who he is, and they can have McKinnon and another guy kind of doing all the chaos stuff.
Yeah.
And he can still be very effective in that manner. It's just he's going to have to do it some. And that's like, you're not asking him to be a completely different player from April to June than he is from October to April, but he's just going to need to do it a little bit. And there are plenty of guys who are like that. I think like there are guys on Tampa and there are guys on Florida who like play a certain way during the regular season, and then everything just gets dialed up a little bit. And I think it's like way too early to say that he can't do that, because even his time in Carolina, he had one good run and a couple of bad ones. And I don't expect him to be Mikko Rantanen and be good every year in the playoffs, but I think if he's good most years over the course of this contract, that's enough.
Someone, let's see, where was it here? From Vaguely, we could have Mikko or we could have Necas, Drury, Brock, and Gavin. I did want to get your take kind of on Jack Drury's also start as 3C. Is that something you anticipate they'll be keeping an eye out around the deadline to bolster the 3C more solidly? Or has Jack Drury done enough? Or is he on track to be doing enough?
I think if the deadline was next week, they'd be looking for a 3C. That's not to say that he hasn't been good. He's just been okay. The sample size is too small to figure out. It's like with like these other guys. Like if we're at 30 games and he has double the points he has right now, it's not enough. But he's also been great defensively. He's been awesome on the PK. Just like doing all the little things also. But he can do all that as the fourth line center.
Yeah.
And like even I think yesterday at Bednar's availability, he mentioned that he still wants to he still wants to put Kelly and Drury and O'Connor together. Like that is still his like fever dream.
I do
and
love
so
that
like
line.
I do think that like come playoff time that will be a line, whether it's the whether there's like 3A and 3B or that's the 4 or whatever it is, like those guys are going to play together at some point. So
yeah,
I think they will probably still look to add another center, I think, unless they just try to like add another like third line wing and do sort of like a weird basically have like a third line that's like doesn't have like a true center, like maybe Ross moves back to center and then that way they can, but they add like a good player to play next to Ross and whoever Victor on the third line or Gabe. I think that's still of all the things that if they have like needs right now, that's probably the one spot where it's like he's doing fine. They're probably going to want more than fine. Maybe he has more than fine in him,
right?
But they could also find that in February or March. So,
all right. Well, that's all I'll ask you for today. I feel like there's so many side quests we could go on. Like Ross Colton's start to the year. I still don't know exactly his fit. Like I think when they put him with the skilled players, he pops off. And so I'm not quite sure what the future holds for Ross Colton. But
I don't think Tampa knew either. I think that was kind of his role in Tampa, and it was successful. He never had like a set. Here's why I play for Tampa. It was always here.
He liked that. I think he had 2C ambition at one point. Yeah, and it's really changed. So, anyways, I want to get like a hot take or a bold prediction for the rest of the Avs season. Honestly, could be anywhere, and you can think about it for a second. If you want, we can preview the Canada road trip first, and then you could be thinking back of mine for a bold prediction. But what is your expectation going into these games? I think that these are pretty good teams, so it could be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think.
So they'll kick it off Edmonton, Vancouver.
Yeah, Edmonton's first?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. If it had been the other way around, I would have maybe been thinking that the second game in Edmonton could end up going poorly.
Yeah. Because they're pretty banged up in Vancouver.
Yeah. I just don't believe in the Canucks as a entity to they're kind of they might make the playoffs, they might not.
Kiefer Sherwood?
They're not a thing. Edmonton is a thing. And the one thing I'll say is I think every like the 2 times I've been there with the Avalanche, those games are insane. They are those 2 teams, like they both just find a different level whenever they play each other.
Yeah,
and it's like watching like whatever this is supposed to be above the NHL hockey.
Super
I guess
international
hockey. It looks more like international hockey whenever they play each other. Then, so yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing, and I almost asked Jared about it yesterday, and I didn't because it's a weird thing to try to ask a question about at this point in the season. It feels like they need to have a dud. Like it almost feels like they need to have like a bad game.
I do,
and let's see what happens after that. Because like I think he's satisfied with like outside of the power play. There have been like little things that have happened where he's like, hey, we need to be better at rush defense, or hey, we need to be better at this thing. And they just fix it like immediately, which is a sign of like a very good team.
Yes.
But they just haven't had like, there's been no adversity. I mean, the amount of adversity they've had so far relative to last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago is so low that there just hasn't been anything for them to really be like, okay, how do we fix this? Or, okay, how do we rebound for this? It's just all been good, which is not a bad thing, but it's just, yeah. So I'm just sort of interested to see what happens like when they do hit a funk. Like, how do they, or is this just going to be one of those weird years where, they end up with 125 points and they just never have a bad funk? I don't know.
Yeah, it's been little funks, right? Like, it's crazy to me that they're without Logan O'Connor, Sam Girard, and they're fine. That's not to say those aren't
Blackwood
important.
Has played one game. Right?
Yeah,
it's like
they're starting goaltender.
They've had injuries. It just hasn't been, it feels like the entire time I've been here, it's been like, man, those 10 games that they had Nichushkin and Lehkonen and Makar and everybody together, they were great. It's just that it's only been, and so this is what happens whenever all the big guns stay healthy.
They're able to hang on and survive. There was one other thing around that, but I already forgot. Yeah, I guess some of those comeback games too, where they've gone down it's all been kind of self-inflicted, and they've been able to get back in those games. Obviously, the trickiness with OT, I'm not too worried about it. But it's time for your bold prediction. Do you have one?
No.
That's
yes.
okay. I put you on
Do
the
I have a bold
spot.
prediction? I think my bold prediction is that Kale's going to get to 100 points.
Ooh, I love that.
I think that's, barring injuries or whatever, I think. Because like last year, it was, he got the 30 goals, and then he almost got, it was like 94 or whatever. I think this is probably the year where he ends up getting to 100. Because to be perfectly honest, like, he hasn't even had the games where he's like, just, clearly and obviously so much better than everybody else. He's had game, like, he's been very good in almost every single game. He hasn't had that many great. He was great against Vegas, and he was great but he hasn't even had, like, he's going to have like a run where he has like 6 great games in 10, and he's going to have like 20 points in those 10 games. He hasn't even really gotten to that part of his. So yeah, I think that he. It's not a hot take to say he's going to win the Norris Trophy. That's like,
I was about to ask. I was going to follow up.
But I think the 100 points thing is, that would be
lock for Norris.
only the second one to do that in 30 years or whatever. So
I hate the Cale Makar can't defend slander, because he was really great defensively in the Vegas game, defending odd man rushes, breakaway chances.
I think he is significantly better at playing defense than the other guys who are in the 2 or 3 other players that are in that, like, if to me the difference between him and Quinn Hughes is not the offensive stuff, it's the defensive stuff. I think he's better defensively than
But Quinn Hughes doesn't have Nathan McKinnon.
Yeah, right.
All right, that does it for the show today. Corey, thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything you're working on currently that you want to tease or promote?
Well, I will say that a portion of the fan base is going to enjoy the Sunday newspaper. If the names Violet Sorengale and Zayden Ryerson mean anything to you, the Sunday paper of the Denver Post is going to be a fun one, because I have a couple stories coming connected to those 2 fictional characters.
I'm so excited. You always get the best out of players to open up about certain things that I don't think I could have tackled this type of a story. I don't think they would have talked to me about reading.
I think they would talk to you about it, actually, but
maybe I just need to try. I will say, I'm working on a piece on the penalty kill. I started with Parker Kelly and got some really good stuff, but I want to flesh it out a little bit more.
He's very good at talking about X's and O's. Like, there are players who talk about X's and O's, and you're just like, I don't understand. Like, people aren't going to understand what you're saying.
Yes.
And there are guys who are like really good at like saying it in a way that makes sense and makes it easy to casual fans to.
But it's not insulting to you either.
Yeah.
It's layman's terms, but like with enough level of detail that it's not just, oh, we need to put pucks on net. That kind of level of detail.
There's that too.
No, he's a lot better at giving you a little bit more. Jesse, a shoe thief. Thank you so much for joining me today, Corey. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to that Sunday piece. Where can people find all of your work and stay up to date with your reports?
The Denver Post is a good place to start. I guess I'm on both, Twitter and Blue Sky. See Masisak 22.
See Masisak 22. You guys make sure to give him a follow. Corey is the best in the biz. That is Guerilla Sports Off Ice. I'm Meghan Angley, Corey Masisak, and we'll have another show for you guys Friday. So keep tuning in. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.